Well, happy Thursday, everybody. This is Mary Peabody with the University of Vermont Extension, and I am your host for today's Power of Business Chat. All this week, we've been celebrating Small Business Week by introducing you to some small business folks that are finding new ways to distinguish themselves and their products. And today, it is my pleasure to have as my guest Christine Picaro, who is the sales manager for Fat Toad Farm. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you very much.
Great. Well, why don't we start by, why don't you tell us a little bit about Fat Toad Farm and what it is that you folks make there and a little bit about where you sell it.
So Fat Toad Farm, we're a small family-run goat dairy in central Vermont. We have 70 alpine dairy goats that we milk twice a day, every day. And with their milk, we make a goat's milk caramel sauce, which is traditionally known as cajeta. We're one of the only producers of goat's milk caramel that makes it in the way that we do. We use big copper pots that we pour the milk into. We add a little bit of sugar, and it takes about 6 hours for it to boil down to the consistency that we're looking for. And after those 6 hours, we bottle it right here on the farm, and everything's shipped out from here too. So it's sort of a start to finish process that happens all here on the farm. And we sell all across the United States. We sell online, so that's our retail aspect. And then wholesale, I guess one of our biggest customers right now is Whole Foods. We got into the North Atlantic about 2 years ago, and now we're selling in the Midwest and also in the South Pacific. But I would say our closest relationship in terms of wholesale accounts are small specialty food stores and cheese shops, which we still sell direct to. So that's a lot of what I do, is sort of communicate with our stores directly to see what their needs are, what they're thinking about our caramel. So I think that's something that we're very, very proud of that we've retained over the past 7 years.
Terrific. And I can tell you that although I have worked with Fat Toad Farm for several years professionally, that it's a product that also lives in my home because it's just a delightful product and it's wonderful. It's a little bit addictive, I have to say, so, but it's definitely excellent. I think a lot of people might be surprised to learn that a relatively small goat dairy that's located in sort of a rural corner of Vermont is actually pretty sophisticated in the use of social media. Can you tell us a little bit about your various social media platforms and a little bit about how you match your message to those platforms?
Sure. So there are 3 of us on the farm actually that sort of interact with each other to manage our various social media outlets. Our biggest one, I would say, is Facebook. That's where we seem to have the most active fan base, the most followers. We use Twitter, Pinterest, and also Instagram. And I think by identifying Facebook as our, strongest social media aspect, we're the most active on that. So we try to post there at least once a day, probably twice a day. And then we coordinate that with Twitter. So we'll make sure that if we're posting, make sure we're posting to Twitter at the same time. Try not to. We like posting them individually because sometimes we'll want to either phrase it differently, make it shorter. Maybe we only think it would be appropriate for Facebook. And then Pinterest is actually sort of completely separate because we like to use that a lot more as a visual, recipe-based interaction with our fans. We also enjoy Facebook and have a concentrated on Facebook because it's really interactive. It gives our fans the opportunity to not only comment, but to like and also to share what we post. And we've seen sort of the most success in terms of interacting with us. It's very much when we post something, we'll receive something back because people feel invested in that. And that is not to say that our other platforms haven't been successful, but I feel like since we've identified Facebook as a kind of a strong leader for us, we definitely spend a little more time on that as a platform.
Great. So, and it doesn't hurt that you have pictures of incredibly cute baby goats, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also, I mean, going back to sort of the beginning of Fat Toad Farm, that was our first sort of communication with people, even though I would say, in the beginning they were actually friends that we knew, people down the road that knew who we were. And that has grown, and, some people have never visited the farm, but we've sort of made the Facebook page, our virtual farm in a way. So even if you
Hmm.
haven't been here physically, I think people that follow us on Facebook feel as if they have visited the farm before. They know who the farmers are. They know who their favorite goat is. They've seen our caramel production room. So I think that we try to give people as much of a farm experience as possible, even if they can't make it up to Vermont.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that this spring during kidding season, there were pictures just about every day of the new moms with their babies, and you could really, sort of track the progress of the growth and watch these adorable animals, and it all sort of connects back to that whole sort of being connected to your food. And part of that whole local food movement, which Vermont is working so hard on, as are many other parts of the country. In terms of social
Right.
media trainings and workshops, we hear a lot about the importance of a call to action, um, and that basically means the importance of getting your friends, your followers, these fans to actually do something, to take some action on your behalf. That Toad Farm recently won a pretty big prize from Federal Express, and I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about that process and how you involved your social media fans.
So when we heard about the contest, one of the first things that we did was actually visit past winners' websites, social media pages, just to see sort of how they were interacting with their fans and how they have done over the past years. Um, and then in terms of communicating with our fans, we realized that, it's a big ask to just sort of be like, vote for us, and sort of paste a link in your profile. What we realized was if you're going to ask people to do something for you, you should be able to sort of give them something back and some sort of enjoyment. And, it's not like we could offer them free caramel, but but what we thought we could do was anytime we did ask them, we shared like a fun photo from the farm, being like, you know, it's Friday, you're probably bored of us, and vote for us. And it was sort of that combination where we didn't feel like we were just calling to action, because I think people then, I mean, even if it's not totally feel taken advantage of, they just don't feel invested. And so if people feel like they're getting something in return, they begin to feel more invested because they're going to want to visit your page because they're going to be like, what did they post today? And even if they get a little chuckle out of it, even if it's just a funny photo, they're going to be more apt to want to click on that link and give you a vote. Um, and I think in the same breath of making sure that you're communicating with your fans and saying, please vote for us. Here's an awesome picture of our caramel room today. We're making cinnamon caramel. We were conscious of the fact that we didn't send out 5 posts a day berating people's news feeds. And it's finding that fine line between being in someone's consciousness, being like, we're here, we would really appreciate your support, but also not taking advantage of them, not making them feel exhausted by your communication. And so I think that finding that communication between how often you communicate with your fans and also making sure when you're asking them to do something to make sure that they're feeling like they're getting something in return, even something very small like a picture or a little fun recipe, can sort of go a long way in terms of people's willingness to engage with you.
Great. So I know one other thing that I think that Federal Express did that was really smart was that they made the voting process very sort of easy for people and low threat. And when
Mm-hmm.
you went to the site, you didn't have to provide an email address, you didn't have to sign up for anything. It was just as simple as really being able to vote. And they were very clear about the guidelines and how often you could vote, and how many times. And so I felt it was something, as somebody who follows you and was then pushing that out to my friends, I felt like it was an easy thing for me to be able to do because I wasn't asking them to give up a lot of privacy issues or stuff. So, and then there were
Definitely, definitely.
multiple
And we
levels.
still had,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, we still had actually some people who didn't like the connection with Facebook because they felt it was limiting. But and that was another thing we had to communicate with people privately. Um, if people were feeling uncomfortable that it was connected to their Facebook,
Hmm.
we didn't sort of make a blanket statement out on Facebook about it because we didn't want to bring FedEx's attention to it. We would message people privately and be like, thank you for your support. If you don't feel comfortable voting, we appreciate the fact that you're even thinking of us.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
making sure you're targeting people individually, especially if they're asking you a question or feeling hesitant about engaging in something like the FedEx contest.
Great. And so this was a multi-step process. And so after you achieved the first hurdle, then the next hurdle was, to go on and I think it was to actually you had to then write something up with your plan, right? Was that
Mhm.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it wasn't totally just the Facebook voting in a popularity contest, but it has a very happy ending. You guys won a $25,000 award from Federal Express, and so any words of advice to other business owners that are listening to us today that might be thinking, oh, next year I'd really like that to be my business.
I would say, especially in terms of social media, I think there's a big push for everyone to be on everything. And my biggest advice for small businesses is just to identify a platform that you feel that you're comfortable with, but also where your customer base exists. And strengthen that because spreading yourself too thin is not going to improve any of your outreach. Social media
Yeah.
is only as powerful as the people that are on it. So if you're speaking to 3 people, you could be doing really good marketing, but you're not reaching a big enough audience. So I would say, identify a social media outlet that you feel confident in, you feel like you have a strong enough customer base, and then work upon that, making sure that anytime you're putting out materials that it says, make sure to follow us on Facebook. We always, anytime we're working with another company or if we're working with a blogger, we always say, when you put this out, could you also mention that we're on Facebook and we would really appreciate it if you would follow us. So we're always making sure that we're linking it back to either our website, our social media. A newsletter doesn't go out with people being able to click on, the Facebook icon so that people can start following us. So it really becomes always make sure that anytime you're sending out a message that it's easy for people to begin to follow you, but also making sure that you're not going on everything and spreading yourself too thin.
Great. So I know we're getting close to the end of our time already, but I just, as someone who thinks about messaging a lot, any other words of advice, not necessarily related to social media, but just general advice for small business owners and farmers about sort of, getting your message clear?
I would say making sure that you have an initial strong vision statement and mission statement for your business, sitting down and making sure that you understand sort of what your business stands for. I think once you do that, anytime you send something out, as long as you can refer it back to it and it's pushing that forward, it works. So, if you're a farm and you say, we make this product and the way that we make our product is unique, right? The process through which we make our product is unique. You should communicate that continually with your fans because that's probably why they're going to fall in love with your product because it's unique in the way that it's made, and they're going to begin to become invested in how you make it. And
Hmm.
so I would really sit down and be like, what is our vision statement? What do we stand for? What is unique about our product? What is unique about our business? And as soon as you can identify that, all of a sudden any sort of messaging you send out there is going to reflect that. So always, I would say, we always refer back to sort of our mission statement. Our goats are caramel and what we think is, important. And that is reflected in our photography. It's reflected in any sort of messaging we send out to our fans. And as soon as people see that consistency, they become more invested and they become more interested in what you're doing.
Great, thank you. And I would just say that I think when you spoke about photography, I would just say if you're watching today and you want to see what some really great product photography looks like, go to Fat Toad Farm's Pinterest pages and check out some of the photos because they are designed to entice you to go out and buy the product immediately and make these recipes, which is exactly what you want. And check out their Facebook and Instagram sites as well because you will not be sorry. You will see some amazingly cute little animals that are working really hard for Fat Toad Farm. So my guest today has been Christine Picaro, and she's the sales manager at Fat Toad Farm. And again, this is Mary Peabody, and we are part of the Power of Business team that is working on behalf of small rural business owners around the country. So thank you, Christine, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. And I will just say that by way of closing that tomorrow we'll be finishing up our week-long celebration with a visit to another value-added food producer. We'll be visiting with George Paul Vinegar. So we'll be heading to Nebraska for that interview, and I hope that you'll be able to join us or catch the recordings. So thank you again, Christine. Have a lovely day, and say hello to the goats for me.
I definitely will. Definitely
Okay.
will.